Okay, welcome to the daily Rambam class. We'll start with, just as we usually do, going over where we are in the Rambam at large, and then we can learn about a new topic today. I'm not sure if you touched upon it yesterday or not, but we can learn all about Muktzah, which is actually quite a popular and relevant topic when it comes to Shabbos. Some of the things that some of the things that we learned about Shabbos were not as practical at the moment. But most of it, pretty much everything that we're learning today is super relevant, super practical, and hopefully are things that you can implement at your Shabbos. So let's first take a look at the Rambam in general. We are now in the third volume of the Rambam, the book of Zmanim, book of times, and in that book we go through the year, starting with Shabbos, Yom Kippur, Pesach, Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Chodesh, fast. So we're in Shabbos. Shabbos is a very large subject. In fact, there are, I believe, 30 chapters in Shabbos. But the good news is that we are just about to conclude learning all the laws of Shabbos, because today we are on chapter 25. So the end is in sight. Today we'll be learning all about Muktzah. Now, Muktzah can be viewed as quite a complicated subject, meaning that there's a lot to remember, a lot of laws to know. But I will try to the best of my ability to simplify as much as possible so that, sorry, bear with me a moment. I just need to attend to one of my children. I hope I could be back as soon as possible. I'm sorry about the inconvenience. I'm back. Sincere apologies. My daughter just got dropped off in the house, and the arrangement wasn't in place for her to be looked after, so I had to be with her. Thank you for your patience and sticking around. That was obviously not planned at all, but in the 20 minutes we have left, we'll do our best.
As long as everybody okay.
Everybody's just fine, Baruch Hashem. But I needed to just do some babysitting, even when I thought I would be giving a shir. But now we're back. Muktzah, a fascinating subject. Most of the people that have been introduced to Shabbos have probably heard of the word muktzah. What does muktzah mean? Muktzah literally means set aside. That's what the word muktzah means. Or in Hebrew, you have the word katzeh, which means the end, all the way on the side. Muktzah means something that has been set aside. The rabbis instituted that anything that was set aside from use on Shabbos may not be handled. I can't say you can't touch it. You can touch it, but provided it doesn't move. The moment you move it, then and that's a problem. That's violating the laws of muktzah. Now, as far as muktzah articles, meaning items that were set aside from use, items that you may not use, there are different types of categories. There are different levels of to what extent or when and why an article can be handled or it cannot be handled. And that's what we're going to learn about today. Today we're going to learn about a few different categories of articles and their definitions, and based on that, how you can handle them on Shabbos. So again, muktzah means that it's been set aside, and the prohibition is not from touching it, but from causing it to move. So if you're able to touch it without causing it to move, that's not a problem. For example, if you were to touch a car from the outside on Shabbos, there would be no violation. But if you were to lean on the car, causing the car to move, then that would be a problem. So let's just chat about a little bit about this outside before we look at the text, so that you're with me. When we talk about muktzah, there are generally 4 types of items. Some items are totally muktzah. Some items are totally not muktzah. Some items are a little bit muktzah, and some items are mostly muktzah. So there we go. We have our 4 categories. Some items are absolutely not muktzah. Some items are a little bit muktzah. Some items are very muktzah or mostly muktzah, and some items are absolutely muktzah. What are these 4 categories? Food, edible food, either for people or for animals, is not at all muktzah. It's absolutely not muktzah. So that would be category number 1. Any food is not muktzah. But that would be provided that it's kosher. If it's not kosher food, then it goes to the other extreme and it is absolutely muktzah. Okay, so that's category number 1. Food is never muktzah as long as it's kosher. Category number 2 are articles with a permissible purpose. So, for example, a knife, a chair, a table. So these articles are almost entirely not muktzah. Knives and forks actually can only be handled for a purpose, but they shouldn't be fiddled with. Meaning, even though a knife and a fork is an article with a permissible use, it should only be handled for a purpose, either to use it for whatever use it is, but not just to fiddle with. That's category number 2. So knives and forks are articles with a permitted use, and they are primarily not muktzah. I think what I said about not fiddling is specifically about cutlery or dishes on the table. There's a whole topic about that. I'm not going to get into it now because we definitely don't have enough time. But there's a whole story with King David and King Solomon where things were getting out of hand and people were taking Shabbos lightly. They needed to put in some additional laws to put things back into place. Then there's a whole discussion about knives and forks, but we're not going to speak about it today. So I guess category number 1 is food is never muktzah. Category number 2 is an article with the permitted use, and that pretty much is also never muktzah, with the exception of knives and forks that can only be handled for a purpose. Category number 3 are articles, items, utensils that have a forbidden use, and they're not entirely muktzah, they're only mostly muktzah. So that would be, for example, a hammer or a saw, a hand saw, any tool that has a use that is primarily forbidden is mostly muktzah, but as we'll learn, such a tool can be used for a permissible purpose. So if you wanted to use your hand saw in order to cut open a watermelon, or if that's fine, or if you wanted to use a hammer in order to split a nut open so you can eat it, again, not a problem. If you wanted to use the scissors in order to hold the place in your siddur or to stop the papers from falling off the table, that's fine. So if it's an article, even if its primary purpose is forbidden, if you are using it for something that's permitted, then that's fine. That's category number 3. And category number 4 are items that are actually not articles. So like sands, basically raw material that has not been fashioned into anything in particular. Sand, stones, sticks. These things are absolutely muktzah. As long as they haven't been turned into utensil, then they cannot be moved at all. So let me summarize. We basically have 3 categories. Let's simplify it. Well, no, we'll keep to 4. Food is never muktzah. Utensils, it depends what they're used for. If they're generally made for permissible use, then they're not muktzah for the most part. If they're made for forbidden use, then they are muktzah unless you're using them for a permissible purpose or if you want to clear the space. That's category number 2. And category number 3, okay, maybe the numbers are getting confusing, but on the one extreme, food is never muktzah. Tools, it depends what type of tool it is. So some tools are allowed, some tools are not allowed, and then it depends how you're using them. And then on the other extreme, sand, stones, bricks, or in their raw state, sticks, all of these things are absolutely muktzah and may not be handled at all. That's pretty much a summary of what we're learning in Rambam today. I don't know how much we'll get through because I think there are 26 halachas, and I see that we've only got 13 minutes. So chances are we're not going to go through all of them. But if you've bared with me in the last few minutes of the different categories, hopefully whatever we learn moving forward will fall into place. Another 1 or 2 topics that we'll speak about is what happens if you have a mixture of muktzah and non-muktzah items. So how do you deal with that? What happens if you have a stone in the middle of your basket of fruit or inside your pitcher of water? Can you put your hand in and take the stone out? Well, a stone is absolutely muktzah, so not. So how do you go about that? Well, another scenario is where you have one article that serves as a base for a second article. So for example, if you have a tray and on that tray you light your Shabbos candles, then technically, even if the Shabbos candles disappeared for whatever reason, even the tray wouldn't be allowed because it was designated to serve articles that cannot be moved. So that's another discussion that we'll have, which is what's called a basis, a base, when you have one item that serves as a base for a second item. So we'll speak about the categories of muktzah that we've spoken about, and please God, time permitting, we'll also speak about when you have a combination of muktzah and non-muktzah items, and then about when one article serves as a base for another article. Hopefully you're still with me. Hopefully this hasn't gotten too complicated. But now let's go back through the halachas and look at the halachas step by step so we can learn all about muktzah. On the left, I've divided it into general categories. You'll see we'll start by talking about utensils of permissible use, and then we'll speak about utensils of forbidden use. That's in that middle category. We'll speak about non-utensils, which are absolutely muktzah. We'll speak about expensive items, delicate items. I didn't mention that. And then that pretty much, these first few points, these 3 points pretty much summarizes muktzah. And then beyond these first 3 points, which are discussed in the first 6 halachas, or the first 8 halachas, we'll go into some more of the details. So let's lay those foundations of the different types of utensils in these first 8 halachas. Okay. Yesh kli shemalachta leheter. There are utensils that are used for permitted purpose. For example, utensils that may be used on the Shabbos for the same purpose for which it is used during the week. For example, a cup to drink from, a bowl to eat from, a knife to cut meat, or bread, a hatchet to crack open nuts. So, in other words, a nutcracker. All of these things are vessels whose primary purpose is permitted on Shabbos. That's one type of utensil. Then we have other utensils that are used for forbidden purposes, meaning a utensil that is forbidden to be used on the Shabbos for the same purpose that it would be used ordinarily. For example, a grinder. So if you have a black pepper glass, and at the bottom there's a grinder, a bull and the like, it is forbidden to crush or grind on Shabbos. So that's category and a second type of utensil. So here we go. These are the rules. Ready for the rules? Here they are. All utensils used for purposes that are permitted, meaning a vessel with a permitted purpose, may be carried on Shabbos whether they are made of wood, earthenware, stone, or metal. Now, they can be moved for any purpose. They could be moved even for the sake of the utensil itself. Meaning if you have a nice chair, an expensive chair, and you don't want it to get ruined by the rain, then you'll be allowed to carry that chair indoors. The only reason you're moving the chair is to protect the chair, but that's fine because a chair is a utensil that can be used on Shabbos. The same would go with a knife, a fork, any item whose use is primarily permissible. Or for the use of the place it occupies. So if it's in the way, if you have a chair and you want to clear the area or you want to move the tables, that's fine. Or to use for a permissible purpose. That's obviously fine because it's a permitted item for a permissible purpose. But if it's a utensil used for purposes that are forbidden, so as I have it in my list over here on the left of the slideshow, if it is a utensil of forbidden use, then again, whether they are made of wood, earthenware, stone, or metal, they can be used, but with certain restrictions. It can be moved if it's in your way. So, for example, if you have a braai on your patio and you want to now set up for a Shabbos meal and the braai is in the way, so you would be allowed to move, even though a brai's primary purpose is forbidden on Shabbos. But after all, the braai is an article, it's a utensil, it's an item. So you would be, obviously, if the braai is out, not if it's lit, it wouldn't be lit on Shabbos. But if that braai is out, you would be allowed to carry the braai out of the way if you want to set your Shabbos table over there. To use it for a purpose that is permitted. So if you want to take a hammer in order to crack open a nut, or you want to use a scissors in order to keep the place in your sitter, so that's all allowed. However, it's forbidden to move it for its own sake. So if you have an expensive piece, an expensive ladder or whatever it is, a piece of equipment, and it was left outside, and you're worried that it's being ruined by the sun or the rain, then you would not be able to move it. So this last scenario, for its own sake, is the difference between an article of permissible use and an article of forbidden use. If it's an article of permissible use, you can also move the article just to protect that very article. But if it's an article of forbidden use, then you would be allowed to move the article to use its space or to use it for a permissible function, but you would not be allowed to move the article in order to protect it. So if you've left your laptop outside and it looks like it's about to pour, then unfortunately you would not be allowed to move that laptop. Maybe what you can do is to take some kind of, a waterproof tablecloth and put it on top or something like that, but you wouldn't be able to move it with your hands. He's not going to speak about it today, but there is also another general exception, and that is, although you can't handle something that's muktzah, you can push it with your body in an abnormal way. So that maybe would still be a solution for the laptop if you were to elbow it out of the way, then that would work. Okay, so let's give some examples. Back to the Rambam. You could move a wooden bowl to eat from it, to sit in the place where it was located, also that it won't be stolen. The latter is what is meant by the expression for the sake of the utensil itself, meaning you don't want it to get ruined, you don't want it to be stolen. Similarly, your utensil may be taken out of the sun so that it will not become parched and break. It may also be removed from the rain so that it will not become saturated with water and deteriorate. These are considered for the sake of the utensil itself and are permitted, since the tasks performed with these utensils are permitted. Similarly, a person may move a mill or a grinder, so now this is an article of forbidden use, but you can still handle it in order to crack nuts open on it or to climb up to a couch on it. This is what is meant by the expression to use it for a purpose that is permitted. Similarly, one may move it to sit in the place where it is located. Like I mentioned, you'd be allowed to move that braai to get out of your way if you want to sit in that space. One may not, however, move it so that it will not break, so that it will not be stolen or the like, as we discussed. So that was two types of utensils: utensils of forbidden use and utensils of permitted use. Those were in the middle when I spoke about mostly not muktzah or entirely not muktzah. But anything that's not a utensil at all, like stones, money, rods, beams, and the like, so that's absolutely muktzah. It is forbidden to be carried, full stop. Nevertheless, even a large stone or a large beam that requires 10 people to carry it, if it's a utensil and it can be carried. So even if you have a very large article that really is barely movable, you need 10 people to move it. Once it's been designed into some type of utensil, article, item, once it's been fashioned in a particular way, then that is no longer under the category of sticks and stones. It is a utensil, and once it's a utensil, it can be handled in the ways that we discussed in the previous halachos. The doors of a house, that's an interesting one. So they're considered to be utensils. However, they may not be prepared. They haven't been prepared for use. Therefore, if they become detached on Shabbos, you wouldn't be able to move the door. That's a unique halacha. I'm not going to dwell on it because of our time limitations. Earth, sand, and a dead person may not be moved from their place because, again, they are not an article, and therefore they are absolutely muktzah. We will discuss, I think, tomorrow that there are ways to deal with if a person dies and the family doesn't want the body to be spoiled in the sun. So there are solutions to this, but by default, you wouldn't be allowed to move a dead body. Similarly, an infant born in the 8th month. This isn't really practical today, but in the times of the Gemara, there was a concept that if a baby is born after 7 months, it will live. If it's born after 9 months, it will live. But if it's born after 8 months, and you know that it wasn't a 7-month baby that stayed an extra month in the womb, but it was specifically an 8-month baby, and there are ways to detect that, then such a baby it would be impossible for such a baby to survive, and therefore such a baby would be muktzah. Although this is not really of relevance today. Number 7. Okay. So this seemed somewhat redundant to me. I wasn't sure why he said it again. But it is permitted to carry, but I'm sure there is a reason. I just didn't manage to figure it out. It is permitted to carry a utensil to perform tasks other than those for which it is intended to be used. What is implied? A person could take a hammer to crack nuts, a hatchet to cut a dried fig, a saw to cut cheese, a rake to collect dried figs, a winnowing shovel or pitchfork to feed a child, a spindle or weaver's shuttle to pierce with, a sack maker's needle to pick a lock, or a millstone to sit on. All of these articles are items, utensils of forbidden use, but you're using it for a permissible function. Okay, a person may carry a sewing needle that is whole to remove a splinter. So that is considered a utensil. It's not just considered a stick. If, however, its head or its point has been broken off, then it already is not considered a utensil, and then it would be like sticks and stones that are absolutely muktzah. If it is still in an incomplete state and its head has not been pierced, it may be carried because already at that point it is considered a utensil. Okay, so here's another interesting one. Whenever a person is careful not to use a utensil, lest its value depreciate. For example, utensils that are set aside as merchandise, you want to sell it, or very expensive utensils, of which one is extremely careful lest they spoil, carrying it is forbidden on Shabbos. So although we said that even an article of forbidden use can be used for permissible use, since you're not going to take your very expensive, I don't know what an example, nothing comes to mind at the moment, but you're not going to take a very expensive tool and use it for something that will break it. So if you changed your mind and on Shabbos you decided that you did want to use this very expensive tool in order to cut open your watermelon, that wouldn't be allowed. Why? Because at the onset of Shabbos, it was set aside from use. So that's another unique category. Delicate and expensive articles are also considered muktzah, and it may not be handled even for permissible use. I see it's 1:30, so maybe I'll just run through the rest of the halachas in just a few seconds from my slideshow, and you're welcome to read it inside. Okay, now the status is set at the onset of Shabbos. So if at the onset of Shabbos the article is muktzah, then it remains muktzah. If at the onset of Shabbos it wasn't muktzah, then it remains not muktzah. That really requires a discussion in its own right. An example that it gives in Halacha 22 is if bricks alone are like sand, they're absolutely muktzah. But if you organize them in such a way that you'll be able to rest on them, so as long as you did that before Shabbos started, then it would make them no longer muktzah. It speaks about repulsive items, as long as they can still somewhat be used, and that's not really a problem. Although I think you'll speak more about a garbage tomorrow. Broken pieces, as long as they can still serve their function, that's fine. But if they can no longer serve their function, then they're absolutely muktzah. So that would be if a cup breaks, then those pieces of glass are absolutely muktzah. You would only be able to handle them if they are a danger. Then muktzah and non-muktzah items together. The general idea is that you should try to shake away the muktzah item without touching it, provided that you're not going to ruin the non-muktzah items. So that's, or if you were taking a basket away from the table and it has some fruits and stones in it, so if you're going to shake off the stones, then they're going to be left on the table, but you want the table to be cleared, so then you'd be able to remove the whole basket. That's just one or two words about that. One as an article as a base for another. If the only thing you have on your table are Shabbos candles, then even if the Shabbos candles were for whatever reason removed, the table itself becomes muktzah, because the table was serving the Shabbos candles. Therefore, at the onset of Shabbos, you should make sure to have other things on the table as well. So practically speaking, what we do is we have a tray on which we have our Shabbos candles, and on that same tray, we always leave a siddur or a prayer book or something on the side on that same tray. That way, the tray is serving both the candles and the book. And then once the candles are out, you would be allowed to remove the tray from the table, because that tray is serving both the candlesticks and the siddur. But if the only thing on that tray were the candlesticks, then the tray and even the table would be absolutely muktzah, and you wouldn't even be able to change the tablecloth. Non-kosher food we spoke about, and disabling an article is something you shouldn't do. You shouldn't do something on Shabbos that will cause an article no longer to be functional. So, for example, you wouldn't be allowed to take a dish that you could have used for food and put it under some kind of petrol leak or something, because obviously once you do that, you won't be able to use the dish again. And on Shabbos, you shouldn't cause a dish to become muktzah. Thanks so much for joining me, and